Happy Monday, everyone. I just thought I'd share with you a little reflection. Today at Mass, the psalm was Psalm 23, probably the most familiar psalm to all of us, a psalm that we've heard so many times. It has such a beautiful image. It's "The Lord is my shepherd." And of course, those of us who live in big cities, maybe we've lost touch with a little bit of that, what it means to have a shepherd. But I just thought I'd share with you a little reflection that I had from a pilgrimage I took to the Holy Land several years ago. First, though, I'd like to reread the psalm in case you didn't follow it at Mass, just to give us this beautiful understanding, the poetry and the richness of the image and the comfort Jesus gives us through this psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This beautiful psalm is one that gives us this image of Jesus who's going to take care of us. How wonderful that in the days of this pandemic, when everyone is filled with fear and anxiety, to have the comfort that this image brings, especially very specifically, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Even when death itself is threatening, I'm not anxious and concerned. The Lord is my shepherd, and he promises me that he will prepare a place for me, a table, even in the presence of my enemies. He will anoint me. His goodness and mercy follow me, and I shall dwell in his house forever. That's the promise of the Lord who is our shepherd. So several years ago, I had a group on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. And the beautiful thing that you do in the Holy Land is wherever you are, you read the scripture passages right there where these things happened. It's a pretty intense experience going on pilgrimage. And I have to always restrain myself when I get back and a parishioner will say, "Oh, Father, how was your vacation?" And I'm like, "Vacation? Do you take 45 people on a bus with you?" And of course, you think it's bad having a YouTube or a flock note from me every day. This, I'm talking 6, 10, 12 times a day, giving conferences at every place we go, and reflections and meditations and all that. It's a lot of work. So with all of that coming at us, every once in a while I decide that the pilgrimage, we need a little bit of a break, a little bit of downtime. And so one of the things that I do sometimes for just some fun is I take the pilgrims to the Dead Sea. And at the Dead Sea, we can talk about the scriptural things around there, but most of all, you just have a couple of hours where you float, because you can't sink in the Dead Sea because of the mineral content, and people just get a kick out of it. It's something completely bizarre and out of the ordinary. So we did that, and of course, when I'm leading a pilgrimage, I feel like a shepherd because I'm always counting. Have I lost any of my sheep? I've got to keep them all straight, got to keep them together, keep them gathered together as our group. And so I'm at the bus in the parking lot by the Dead Sea and counting and making sure everyone's on there. And a woman walks up to me whom I've never seen, and she looks at me and says in a British accent, "Is this my bus?" And I said to her, "Well, if you don't recognize me, this is not your bus." And she says, "Well, my bus was right here." And I looked at the empty parking spot next to us. I says, "Well, let me ask my bus driver." So we got our bus driver and asked, and he talked to some of the other bus drivers, and they said, "Oh, sorry, that bus left 20 minutes ago." And so there is this woman stranded in the middle of a parking lot by the Dead Sea. And I said, "Well, where were you going?" She says, "Well, I was just on a day trip coming from Jerusalem and going back to Jerusalem." I said, "Well, God has blessed you because we're on our way to Jerusalem. You can ride on our bus, and we'll take you." And she told me her hotel. I said, "Oh, it's not far from where we're going, so we'll make sure that you get safely there." I said, "There's just one thing. We have one stop left between here and Jerusalem. Do you mind riding along, knowing it's not going to be a direct shot back to Jerusalem. She said, oh no, that's fine. So coming from the Dead Sea towards Jerusalem, there is a valley. And this is the valley that pilgrims in the time of Jesus would walk from Jericho up to Jerusalem. And it was a dangerous valley because there would be bandits around. It's on this road that Jesus put his image of the Good Samaritan, that the man was going from Jerusalem to Jericho and got waylaid. And so usually pilgrims traveled as a group on this to be safer. Well, so I take my pilgrims to this valley, and we walk out and we look at this very barren landscape and we read Psalm 23, because this is the valley of the shadow of death. And usually what I do at the beginning of each day is I kind of ask, is there anyone who has a favorite scripture passage or a favorite place in the Bible? And we're going to be there today so that you could read. So you have a memory that you form. Not only was I at that place, I actually got to read that part of the Bible at that place. And so we get to the valley of the shadow of the death, and I say, have I promised this to anyone? Does anyone want to read this? Because, of course, everyone has their Bible with them. And no one had signed up for that. And all of a sudden, this British woman says, I can do it. And I said, well, okay, sure, happy to have you do it. Do you need to borrow someone's Bible? No, I know it by heart. And so she read The Lord is my shepherd by heart. And then afterwards she began to cry. And she explained to all of us that the reason she was there in the Holy Land was that her mother had just died back in England. And she was in also some problems in a relationship that she'd been in that broke up. And so she was alone. She didn't have that relationship anymore. And her mother had just died. She felt lost. And her friends said, oh, you should go to Tahiti or the Bahamas or this, that, and the other. She says, no, I want to go to Jerusalem. And she didn't know why. And her friends teased her because she wasn't going to church. Why would you go there? And she didn't know. And so she came to Jerusalem. She didn't know what to do. She took a day trip to the Dead Sea. And then she got found. And she experienced in that moment, reading Psalm 23 with us in the valley of the shadow of death, that God was present, that God had sought her out, and that she was lost no more. And that the Lord was going to be at her side to comfort her and to show her his beautiful plan for her life. And so I think what you and I need to do is reflect on the fact that when we're lost, when we're troubled, when we're overwhelmed by everything going on around us, remember, the Lord is there. He's your shepherd. He loves you. He'll care for you. So let that be the peace that comes in these troubled days.